Okay, let's talk about the results of the Citizens' Assembly and their surprising vote to radically liberalise the abortion laws here. And let's be clear about what the constitutional position on abortion here is, and it's Article 43(3) of the Constitution. And it says, the state acknowledges the right to life of the unborn and, with due regard to the equal right to life of the mother, guarantees in its laws to respect and, as far as practicable, by its laws to defend and vindicate that right. And that was passed by a constitutional referendum in, I think, 1983. And that has proved to be very contentious over the last several years, and there are now proposals to change that. And the Citizens' Assembly was asked their views on this, and they were asked, do you think Article 43(3) should be retained in full or not retained in full? And just 12% said it should be retained, and 87% said it should not be retained in full. They were also asked, do you think Article 43(3) should be repealed or replaced or amended? And 44% said it should not be repealed, and 56% said it should not be retained in full. And they were also asked, should Article 43(3) be replaced with the provision that explicitly authorises the Oireachtas to legislate on the issue of abortion? And 57% said yes, and 38% said no. In other words, giving the Oireachtas the right to decide what should apply in regard to abortion here, not the Constitution. Isn't that a good idea, Cora? Let the Oireachtas decide.
No, it's not a good idea, because what we're talking about here is the right to life of unborn children, and that should be in the Constitution. It's a fundamental human right, and the ideal place for that is the Constitution, because the Constitution protects human rights in Ireland. What my concerns are about the Citizens' Assembly and the way it was run, Vincent, is that it was chaotic, muddled and managed, and the members were treated in that way. And I'm not in any way surprised at the radical results that have come back. What we need to remember, and what viewers need to think about, is the fact that these people were not experts. They were not given expert evidence.
That's right, yeah.
And they were voting on things that they had no information about.
What would be so bad about giving our Parliament the right to decide what regime should apply with regard to abortion, given that there's a lot of disparate views about this issue among the population as a whole? Why not let the Dáil decide?
You see, that comes back to why the Eighth Amendment went into the Constitution in the first place, and why a majority of the Irish people wanted it in there in 1983. It's because they looked around the world and they saw what was happening. They saw that the right to life of unborn children was being stripped away, like it happened in England in 1967. And what happens in England today,
all right,
1 in 5 pregnancies
But if the Irish
abortion.
people now want to change their minds about that, they're entitled to do so under the Constitution, and they'll be asked to do that in a constitutional referendum, which is probably going to take place early next year. And the question I'm asking you again is, what would be so bad about Parliament being asked to decide what abortion regime we should have here?
Because what you're saying there is, we put it into the hands of elected representatives, or indeed anybody, to say...
Not anybody, elected representatives.
But anybody, anyone, does not have the right to say that another human being cannot live. That's completely against just genuine human rights protection.
And
that's the reality.
Would you not trust the elected members of our Dáil and Senate, insofar as the Senate people are elected, would you not trust them to act appropriately in this instance?
Well, what I would say again is just look around the world, see what's happened. Look at England, where 90% of babies diagnosed with Down syndrome in the womb are aborted. That's what happens once you undermine and once you remove protection for unborn children. The other thing that happens is that you undermine the dignity and the protection of every person living in society, because you can't protect some people and not protect others. Either we protect everyone or we don't protect anyone.
What's your question, Vincent?
My question is, isn't it a good idea just let Parliament decide?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, we live in a democratic society. I think one thing that this has thrown up, I suppose, is the importance of who you vote for and knowing what they stand for, so that I suppose people know what they're getting. I suppose I was elected, and I made it very clear, my views. I do wonder sometimes who has elected Cora to anything. I don't know who you represent.
What does that matter?
But in the
What's
sense
that got to do with it?
No, but
we're
in the
arguing
sense...
a point. It doesn't matter whether she's elected by anybody or whether anybody would vote for her if she did go for election.
But I'm an elected member of Dáil Éireann, and we voted to establish the Citizens' Assembly, and now the work is coming back to the committee. I am, I suppose, surprised at how
We're dealing with the question of should the Constitution be changed to allow our Parliament to decide on what abortion regulations should apply here.
Yes.
And why do you think that's so? Why shouldn't there be, for something as crucial as the protection of life, why shouldn't that remain in the Constitution?
Well, first of all, I mean, there's clear from the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly and from pretty much all polling data that there is a massive appetite out there to change abortion laws in Ireland. I don't think anyone could argue that amongst the people of Ireland. I suppose Cora mentioned there about the liberal abortion regime in the UK, and it's very easy to compare with the UK, but if you look at maybe the Dutch situation, where they rolled out a significant sex education programme in secondary schools, they've a huge contraceptive programme for teenagers, and they have extremely liberal regime for abortion, but they have the lowest rate of abortion in Europe. And one always also has to remember that having no abortion in Ireland doesn't stop abortion. We just export the problem. And I think it's time for Ireland to wise up, for the members of Dáil Éireann to wise up and to start treating women correctly in this country.
You're in favour of a change that would simply allow the Oireachtas to decide on all issues to do with abortion. You wouldn't.
We have a clear.
You wouldn't, for instance, be in favour of replacing the present Article 43(3) with a provision whereby abortion would be permissible in certain circumstances, but not otherwise.
I think what we have from the Citizens' Assembly is we have seen a process, and you spoke there of some of the questions. There was sort of like a cascade effect with the questions. So it was like, OK, do you see this or this? What do you want? Where do you want to go from here? So it was a very, very, if anyone that looked in on the Assembly or read the transcripts, it was a very robust system to get to this point of recommendations.
It would be really helpful if you just answered the question. The question I said was, so you're in favour of the Dáil and the Senate being empowered to take all the decisions with regard to abortion, rather than have...
I think we need to frame the
rather than having a change to Article 43(3) that, for instance, permitted abortion in certain limited circumstances.
My personal view would be, leaving all of what's come out in the last few days, my personal view is that women's health should have no place whatsoever in the Constitution. However, it looks like we may be in a position now with the recommendations that we have to amend what's already there.
OK. Reid.
Well, I think you make a good point about should we have an insertion to replace the 8th Amendment that the Dáil should legislate for it, because we already have an article called 15(2) in the Constitution which states that the Dáil should legislate for, you know, to govern the country. And that should be sufficient for the Dáil to legislate on this issue. Our position...
But is that fair? Because, for instance, people voting in an election vote for candidates and for parties on a whole wide variety of things.
Sure.
And they vote for them because, for instance, there'd be a tax cut, or there'd be a promise of public expenditure in a particular way, or there'd be an issue to do with local affairs, or whatever, and maybe to do with abortion as well. But it would be only one of a whole assortment of issues that they'd be voting.
Absolutely, and all of the issues you mentioned are issues that we legislate for, or are meant to legislate for. So abortion should be one of those issues. Women's health should be one of those issues.
Okay.
And the 8th Amendment should be taken out of the Constitution.
But
and we'll still be fighting for that on the Dáil Committee. We'll still want that.
But the argument that this is democratic doesn't seem to me to hold up, particularly on an issue that so many people regard as crucial, namely the issue of abortion.
But there are lots of issues that are regarded as crucial. There is nothing in the Constitution that legislates for men's health, for example. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that men are subject to some kind of an article if they want to have a vasectomy to stop procreating. But there is to control women's lives. No. And that's why the 8th Amendment should be...
There's nothing to stop women's
That's why the 8th Amendment should be removed. And look, I mean, I know that you're making all these points about what's fair, and Cora makes a point about what's contentious and all the rest of it. But Savita Halappanavar died because of the Eighth Amendment. She died because of the Eighth Amendment.
That's not true.
There have been women in this
Okay.
country put through absolute disgraceful, degrading and inhumane treatment. There was the case of PP put on life support machines.
It is true that had abortion been available here, she almost certainly wouldn't have died. But that was not the only reason she died. She also died because of inappropriate treatment subsequent to her request for an abortion.
But had she been given the abortion, she probably wouldn't have needed the or wouldn't have got the inappropriate treatment. Not only would she be alive, she'd probably have children today. That's the mad thing about it, that she'd be alive and having a family.
Vincent, this
and
is really
those who say we're protecting the unborn are actually
it's very worrying.
Those who say that they're protecting let me finish my statement, Cora. Those who say that they're protecting the unborn are actually flying in the face, in this particular case, of allowing women to go ahead and have children in the circumstances of their choosing, where their health is protected.
Okay.
You know, I think it's really worrying that Breed still is talking about the tragic case of Savita Halappanavar, despite the fact that 3 independent reports have found that the lack of abortion in this country did not cause her death. You know,
it's manifest. It's true that had she got an abortion when she asked for it, she would be alive.
Well, you know,
manifest.
All we can do is look at what the 3 independent reports say.
Isn't it obvious, though? Isn't it obvious that she wouldn't have had the subsequent complications had she received, had the fetus been aborted at the time that she had?
Well, no, the problem was sepsis, which wasn't picked up and wasn't treated. That was the problem. It wasn't abortion. Wasn't a lack of abortion in this country. And that's
Are you
coming
saying she would have died then, even if she hadn't had an abortion, she would have died anyway?
What I'm saying is that I'm going on the word of 3 independent reports prepared by experts who looked into all of the medical evidence. In fairness to Breed, I don't think that she was there and did that kind of work. But I want to say this.
I was there.
I don't think that you prepared those reports, Breed.
Well, neither did you, Cora.
No, I didn't. But
unless you're creating your alternative facts here now.
No. I'm going with the true facts, which are the independent reports. But let's get back to the Citizens' Assembly and the results, Vincent. Kate has talked there about making decisions and giving legislators the right to make decisions. I just want to talk about what happened yesterday, and I would encourage viewers to watch the footage. Kate wasn't there yesterday. I didn't see her, or on Saturday, but I have never.
My children yesterday.
Yes, well, I have never seen anything like what happened on taxpayers' money in Malahide yesterday and Saturday. There was utter chaos.
On people's money.
Utter chaos. It was completely confusing. Let's take one example, just one example. The citizens were asked to vote on things. They were given information minutes before the vote. One asked a question about time limits. They were told that the time. Let me just make this point, because it's really
you're
important.
Talking about. Let's get away from the Assembly.
No. Hold on, this is very important about what's going to happen next. Okay. They asked a question about time limits, and they were then told that the time limit of 22 weeks was chosen because after that an injection of potassium chloride would have to be put into a baby's heart. They then voted a couple of minutes later without reflecting on that. What I want to ask Kate, I have a question for Kate.
It's impossible to have a discussion with you, Cora, because
please. There are 2 people here who support repeal, and I'm the person here.
Please don't talk about the Citizens' Assembly.
I want to ask Kate
whatever happened there is irrelevant to the issues we're discussing. Go on.
I want to ask Kate a question. After considering the fact that these people were not experts, that type of information was given to them minutes before they made a vote.
So you want to talk about that?
Does she think that that is a suitable basis for the Dáil to now go on and make a decision? Because the reality is that the Oireachtas Committee needs to look at the chaos of the Citizens' Assembly.
What does it matter? The issue is what decisions are going to be taken. Will there be a referendum? And the question I want to ask you is, what is so bad about asking the people again to decide whether they want to retain Article 43.3 in its present form or whether they want to change it?
Because what you're talking about is whether people will be allowed to live or die, whether children in the future will be allowed to live and have a life, or whether Vincent, they will have an injection into their heart. That's the reality.
Are you seriously suggesting that the people shouldn't have a right to determine what's in the Constitution?
No, but what I'm saying is that we need to be realistic about what has happened, realistic about the fact that where we're at is a procedure, talking about a procedure that would allow babies to be poisoned in that way.
But are you disputing the right of the Irish people to have whatever they want in the Constitution?
Well, there's nothing democratic about that.
She's not going to answer that question, Vincent.
Sorry,
she's not going to answer it, and she's dominating the conversation.
I've answered that question several times for you.
The
answer is I don't agree with the referendum for two reasons. Firstly, because we don't have a referendum to do something dramatically, radically wrong to our Constitution, which is to remove a human right. And secondly, because both Kate and Breathe and everybody else who supports repeal does not want to talk about the reality of what an abortion entails.
I think
very distressing and upsetting.
I think it's Cora that needs to get realistic here. The fact of the matter is there's a massive appetite there for change in abortion laws in Ireland. Some people favour free, safe, legal, no restrictions, full bodily autonomy, and some people then are on the far end, no abortion in any situation. What we're trying to get to here is the middle ground, where I believe the vast majority of people of Ireland sit, where there's a sense of, there's a right to life, but there's obviously situations occur, and, you have, I suppose, many people miscarry before 12 weeks. Then, obviously, a lot of the structural defects can't be diagnosed until 20-21 weeks. So it's far more complicated than black or white on this. And what I suppose we have to do is, as the Oireachtas, we have to work with the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly and ultimately put a referendum to the people of Ireland to let them choose and to exercise their democratic right in this regard.
Just get Gavin in.
No, he's a man, he can't talk.
No, he doesn't have an opinion.
He's a man, he's not allowed to talk.
Can I make a very quick observation about a point that Breed made, that the Oireachtas under Article 15.2 explicitly gives, or the Constitution gives the Oireachtas the power to legislate. The Oireachtas only has the power to legislate in line with what the Constitution already provides. That is why, right now, because of the 8th Amendment, it cannot legislate to have abortion in other circumstances.
But my point is you don't need to insert that in again.
Can I get to the point, though, which is that the Citizens' Assembly was told that even if you simply strike out the 8th Amendment, you just remove Article 40.3.3, draw a line through it and pretend it's not there, it is still not clear whether, in fact, the Oireachtas would be empowered to legislate for abortion under any circumstances, because, as a very eminent senior counsel, Brian Murray, told the Assembly, long before the 8th Amendment was introduced, both the High Court and Supreme Court had, in passing, in reaching other conclusions, said the Constitution could be invoked basically in a pro-life way, that you could argue that the unborn already enjoyed the right to life under certain constitutional clauses, and therefore the Oireachtas would not have been able to legislate for a pro-choice regime anyway.
That's right. So we could find that out easy enough.
We could, but
that if you give the Oireachtas the power to legislate on this issue, then there presumably would be a constitutional challenge, and then the Supreme Court would tell us whether that's true or not.
The point I'm simply trying to make, Vincent, is that it creates more certainty as to the extent of the powers that the Oireachtas would have if you introduce a substitute clause rather than simply drawing a line through Article 40.3.3 as it currently is, according to the evidence that the Assembly was given.
So, Vincent, the word on the street today is that the main parties in the Dáil, both Fine Gael, Kate's party and Fianna Fáil, are going to do their best to water down what the Citizens' Assembly have recommended, so that it's not recognisable as the recommendations have come out.
But Brita, I won't be involved in any water.
Well, then you better leave Fine Gael, because your party will be doing their best to water it down. They are shocked at what the Citizens' Assembly, they have fought all along for this, and we were saying you don't need a Citizens' Assembly, you have one. It's called Dáil Éireann. We were all elected on the basis of where we stand on these issues. They insisted on going for the Citizens' Assembly. Selecting the 99 individuals of what they thought Middle Ireland.
This was only postponed.
So they're shocked at what the Irish people are saying back to them. They're absolutely taken back, and they don't want this. So the establishment are going to try and water it down. We've got to go in there, and I hope Kate will be with me on fighting for the rights of women to choose.
Breed is actually right. I don't agree with her much, but I do think she's absolutely right on that. The politicians who want to see the removal of the 8th Amendment thought that they set up the Citizens' Assembly as a way to...
No, that's not the politicians.
Hold on a second.
That's not what I said.
But I think that the Citizens' Assembly was set up with the hope of getting moderate results, which it would be easy to sell to the public. Now they've come back with the reality of what the repeal campaign actually wants, which is abortion on demand.
What the people of Ireland want.
But I can assure you, Breathe, that if things go ahead without discussing the reality and without really getting to the root of why the Citizens' Assembly was allowed to operate in such a chaotic manner, then you'll get what you want anyway.
I think it's a valid point, though, that if things had worked out different from the Citizens' Assembly report, you'd be sitting here tonight with a completely different
endorsing
argument.
Well, I wouldn't, because there's still only 99 people, and some of them didn't show up on Sunday.
When any member of any advocacy group comes on a show and starts making commentary that sort of says that the democratic process and the vote and a referendum, that for some reason that should be overrun, that's a very concerning thing in a democratic society.
Can I say...
Okay, Shane, tell us about what the tweets are saying.
Yes, indeed, Vincent. Well, as you can imagine, there's an awful lot of them coming in. We can't even get near them, the amount of them, because they're just coming in so thick and fast. Just on the, I know we want to move on from the Citizens' Assembly, but a couple of people pointing out that Cora has been very critical of it, but Cora herself actually presented at the Citizens' Assembly, including the Times Ireland journalist Ellen Coyne, who has been doing a kind of thread on some of the comments made tonight on the show. Mary Buckley also tweeted in to say Cora is ridiculous about the Citizens' Assembly, which was led by a distinguished judge, informed by international experts and reached conclusion by debate. Someone else says if the results of the Citizens' Assembly were in her favour, would Cora be so against it? Patrick says, I wouldn't trust our politicians who show weak leadership. The Irish people, once given the truth, will protect the right to life. Someone else, Scotus J, says, would Vincent or any of the panel like a referendum on their own life? We live in a democratic society after all. Mairead Fallon tweeted to say Cora is right. No one, TD or not, should have a right to decide if another human being lives or dies. Kev says what you've seen from the Citizens' Assembly is that the Constitution is no place for healthcare provision. And Declan Ganley has been watching the show, and Declan Ganley has tweeted to say Fine Gael TD on Vin B complains about Cora Sherlock not being elected, and in the next breath welcomes unelected Citizens' Assembly result.